Good morning, everybody. We are about to start the virtual tour on Databricks. I am Enrique Pascual. I'm the solutions architect for EMEA on WhereScape, and I will guide you through this virtual tour about WhereScape and Databricks. I will start by sharing my screen. And now you should be able to see my Databricks environment. First, I will do a short introduction about Databricks and about the products of WhereScape. Then I will explain what the demo will consist of, and then we will go through the demo during the next 20-something minutes. If you have any questions, you can add those questions to the Q&A, or you can ask them at the end as well. So first of all, maybe many of you know already about Databricks. Databricks is a SaaS product that consists of a Spark engine that you can use, and it will basically allow you to use different languages like Python or Java, and in our case, Spark SQL, to load data, manipulate, and in our case, for today, create a data warehouse. That's on the Databricks side, okay? On the WhereScape side, if you're familiar with WhereScape, WhereScape has two products. The first one is WhereScape 3D, which is our modeling tool. This is the tool which we model the architecture, okay? There is no physical tables. And in the case of today, we will model a data vault. It could also be something like a 3NF or a star schema. And of course, it could also be on any of the other platforms that we support. But today it will be on Databricks. Okay, again, this is our modeling tool. No physical tables are created in this case. And this is WhereScape Red, which is our builder tool. We call it the builder tool because here is where you will actually create the physical tables. Think about all the DDL code, all the DML code to load the data, and so on. The demo of today will consist of discovering a data source. In this case, it will be Northwind, but it could be any other relational source or any source that has a JDBC or an ODBC or FAT files. Then we will create a small data vault. We will see how we can model that with 3D. As I said before, it could also be any other of the modeling styles. That's up to you. And then we will see how we can generate, based on rules, the data vault model and the loading and the staging layers. Okay. Then we will see how we can deploy that into WhereScape Red. And at the end, we will see how we can create a star schema and how we can make all that translate into our Databricks environment. If you're familiar with the Databricks Medallion Architecture, that can be applied in this case, for example, with our loading layer, could be our bronze layer. Our silver layer or our integration layer could be, in this case, our data vault. And let's say our golden layer or our presentation layer could be something like a star schema or a business vault at the end. I'm going to switch now to WhereScape 3D, okay? And the first thing that we are going to do is define a connection. In our case, for today, this will be our Northwind connection. If you're familiar with this, it's a sample database from Microsoft, but it could be any relational source, any source that has an ODBC or a JDBC connection, or things like flat files, local files, ADLS, S3, APIs. Let's say that any connection that you have an example for, we can actually integrate in both WhereScape 3D and WhereScape Red. Okay, once our connection is defined, we can click on this wizard that says Discover Connection. We can create a new version. I'm going to give it today's date. And then we have a series of options, like we can choose what kind of schema we want to load. in this case, DBO only, and a series of filters, for example, to include, exclude tables, or in this case, we're going to exclude table types as our system tables and our views. This will not be discovered. Okay, I'm going to click on OK and on Next, and this will run something we call a discovery method, which is basically a series of SQL queries that are run against our system tables, and that will discover or bring back the metadata from our source. Okay, in this case, think about things like my table names. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. My table names, okay. Attribute names, attribute types, relationships, indexes, transformations, all those things can be discovered. And they will be exposed by WhereScape 3D. Okay, if I am missing some of the relationships, I can always create them manually, or I can even derive the relationships with this wizard. This is useful if I have something like a data lake where the files will not have those relationships. I can use this wizard to create those relationships for me. Okay. The last thing that I want to show you about our source is when we run a profiling. Okay, we can actually show the profiling result in a graph, and this will show us a series of metrics that can allow us to spot things like data quality issues, for example, or maybe on another table. Here you can see that our region is roughly half empty. This can allow us to flag this attribute as a data quality issue, as I was saying, or I can let know my developers that maybe they should ignore this attribute for the time being until it is correctly populated. Okay, to keep track of how my sources change, I can also click on compare models and compare my current model with an older version to see what changes have occurred. In this case, these two attributes have changed, two have been added and two have been deleted, and these two tables on the right-hand side have also been deleted. Okay, this is a way to keep track of my sources, and I can schedule this discovery and this comparison every week, for example, or every month to make sure that my developers know which tables have changed on my sources. Next, I'm going to move to my data vault design. And now I'm going to create a new version, again with today's date. And you can think of this as an empty canvas where we can start to define, in this case, our data vault model. If you're familiar with the data vault training, during the trainings, they explain you need to know your source to know which attributes will be sent to each of the data vault entities, as the data vault is just a representation of my sources. Okay. In this case, I'm going to choose one of my tables, which is going to be customers. And I'm going to select, for example, my customer ID as my business key. So I would expect to create a hub, and then I will select 3 attributes for example, a satellite medium volatility, and the rest of my attributes, which are my addresses and so on, I will set them to a low volatility. Okay. Now, when I click on OK, I have all my attributes flagged. These are what these colors signify. And when all my source has been modeled, I can go to this wizard here and click on Generate Data Vault. And again, I'm going to add today's date here. And this will run a series of model conversion rules. And with my input and the metadata from the source, it will generate a data vault. Okay, if I click Finish, Now, as I was expecting, I have created a hub and 2 satellites. Those rules have created these entities. They have sent the attributes that I have flagged to the different entities. That's why those flags are necessary in this case. And they have also added the hash keys, the change hashes, and the necessary technical columns to have a 2.0 data vault modeled. Okay. Once I'm happy with my data vault, I can click on create load and stage. And this will create those intermediate stages that we were talking at the beginning of the demo, which are my load and my staging layers. Okay, my load is a one-to-one copy of my source for extraction, and my stage is basically to calculate the hashes. Yes? So here you can see those 2 extra tables, which are necessary to load the data vault properly. Okay, from now on, I am going to use a more complete model, which is this one here, just for the interest of time. But you can see it is modeled from the same source, and it actually has the same tables. So you can see here our hub customer and our 2 satellites, okay, with the same structure as you were seeing before. Okay, on the last step, I will click on export to red, and this will create an XML file with all the model from the metadata. If you're familiar with WhereScape 3D, on the last step is where we indicate which is the target that we will export this model to. Okay, so in that last step, we will indicate that in this case, it will work with Databricks, and then things like the data types and the transformations will be added accordingly, depending on my source and my target. Okay, on this last step, we can export to red, and that will create that XML file that contains the metadata only of the model. We have not created any physical tables yet. Okay, once we deploy that model into WhereScape Red, this is how that data vault model will look. We'll have our load tables, our stage, hubs, links, and satellites. Okay, when we deploy this model into WhereScape Red, based on templates will generate the DDLs, which are based on a template. Okay, in this case, it's a relatively easy one. However, we can add those extra options that we may need, in our case for Databricks, on our extended properties as well. Okay. The other thing that Red will generate on deployment by default is the DML. Okay, in this case, it's a Python script. That contains all the necessary code, including the SQL code, in our case, Spark SQL, to extract and to load all this data into Databricks. Okay. Once that is created, I'm going to truncate this table in case it is already populated. Okay, and I am going to display the data now. We are still truncating the table. Okay, and now I will display the data. Okay, now this data, this table is completely empty, and I can do things like loading, sending to the scheduler, and let's say all the day-to-day operations that you would like to do on your warehouse. Things like changing columns, adding columns, changing names, data types, all the things that you would expect to do on your tables. You can also do them inside WhereScape Red. I'm going to load one of the tables so you see how this is executed and how we see the results on the results pane. This will basically run the script that we have generated based on the templates. And this includes the Spark SQL necessary to load the data from our Northwind source, and it will upload an extraction file that will be staged on the Databricks file system, and then it will run the necessary SQL via an ODBC in order to load that file into our Databricks target. Okay. Once that is actually finished, like now, we will see all the results on our results pane. Okay. In this case, it's a very small table. We have only loaded 8 rows. Okay. And now if I display the data, we can see that the data has been loaded again. And we have a technical column, which is a timestamp that allows us to see that we have just loaded it right now. If we now move into our Databricks environment, we can find this same table on our catalog. And this was load categories Northwind. And if we look at the sample data, we can see these same columns. And again, with this timestamp, we can see that we have just loaded this table on this load operation. Okay. So basically, of course, everything we do inside Red will be translated to our target platform, in this case, to Databricks. If I go back to Red, I can also schedule this load through the scheduler. I can also create jobs from groups, and I can also create all the documentation based on our metadata as well. So everything will be kept up to date. This is roughly everything that I wanted to show you today. Now, if there's any questions, you can type them into the Q&A and we will try to answer them. Okay, well, for now, we don't have any questions. I'm going to go back to our diagram to go over what we have seen during the demo. We have talked about the Databricks environment and the Medallion architecture. We have already explained how both WhereScape Red, our builder tool, and how WhereScape 3D, our modeling tool, work. And then during the demo, we have seen how to discover and how to profile our sources and how to keep track of those changes in our sources. We have also seen how to model a small data vault and how that process would look within WhereScape 3D. And also how to use the model conversion rules to generate the intermediate stages of the loading and the stage where our hashes will be calculated. And then we have seen how we can deploy that into WhereScape Red, and how then Red will generate, based on templates, the appropriate DDL and DML code in order to create and to load that data into Databricks. Then we have seen how that actually works on WhereScape Red itself, and we have seen how that translates into the Databricks environment. Thank you for joining on this virtual tour. And if you have any questions, you can send us an email, and we can arrange a different demo for you or answer any questions you may have via email. Again, thank you for joining and have a great day.